Welcome to the Success is Subjective podcast series brought to you by collegealternative.org, presented by Lilly Consulting. I'm your host, Joanna Lilly. In today's episode, I had the pleasure of interviewing David Weider. David is an adventure therapist living in Boise, Idaho. He worked for several leading wilderness therapy programs in Utah and Colorado from 2004 until 2021. His journey to wilderness therapy began with his own struggles as a teenager. What brought him through that time in his life was his discovery of the outdoors, travel, and adventure sports. These passions led him to a Bachelor of Arts degree in adventure education from Prescott College. Extensive periods of time living in small groups in the backcountry inform his therapeutic emphasis on connection, the transformative nature of honesty, and experiences of overwhelming beauty. David believes that developing one's relationship is a lifelong practice that serves as a foundation for mental health. He knows that the context of each individual's culture and family system is central to their therapy work. David sees adventure, and not just the kind that happens in the outdoors, as an integral part of holistic health. He encourages clients to develop self-awareness and self-compassion, a pro-social orientation, and a thirst for personal growth. Witnessing breakthrough moments for individuals and groups is what makes David's therapy or therapy work meaningful for him. David is originally from Santa Fe, New Mexico, and has spent much of his life exploring the American Southwest. He received his Master's of Arts in Clinical Mental Health Counseling from Adams State University in Southern Colorado. David can often be found playing outside, usually climbing on large rocks or surfing deep snow. He enjoys getting lost in less developed regions of the world and has lived in Asia and Latin America. David is always looking forward to more travel with the way it refreshes the mind and the spirit. After a 20-year hiatus, he is currently enjoying making ceramic sculptures. Let's not wait any longer. Here's David. All right, David, I'm super excited to have you on the podcast. We were literally just like, is this going to happen?
I'm excited. Thanks for having me.
Yeah.
It took some effort to get our schedules to line up.
It took some serious effort, so I really appreciate you hanging in there with me. Let's just jump right in, because I feel like you and I have had conversations before about like some of your history, but I've never actually like asked you point blank. Why don't you tell the listeners, where did you grow up and what were you hearing from your family, as well as kind of the community in which you were raised, about post-secondary education?
Okay. I had sort of a peculiar childhood, a lot of different places, a lot of moving. I was born in New York City, and we lived there and sort of out suburbs of New York until I was about 8. And then we moved to Santa Fe, New Mexico when I was like 8, 9. Then we moved back to New York for a couple of years. And we moved back to Santa Fe when I was 11. I already forgot what your question was. What? Yeah.
Well, what are you hearing? I mean, going back and forth between New Mexico and New York and maybe some other places in between. But like, what were you hearing from your parents or the kind of area in which you were raised about this idea of post-secondary education?
Sure. Okay. So my family's pretty out there, like hippie, liberal. I don't know what other words you want to call that, but not traditional, right? That said, both my parents have bachelor's degrees. They're both. My dad was the first person in his family to get one. My mom's brothers are probably ahead of her, but yeah, first generation bachelor's degrees. But both my parents had careers as professional artists. My dad was a granite sculptor, and my mother was a ballerina. So they both had those careers, and then those careers sort of ended, and then they actually met in Tibetan Buddhist seminary in Vermont in the 70s. And that's full hippie at that point, or whatever you want to call it. So I grew up with a strong emphasis on education, but not necessarily traditional sources of education. That said, I went to primarily fancy private schools from kindergarten all the way through high school. I went to Santa Fe Prep, so that sort of paints the picture pretty clearly. And the expectation was that yeah, I would go to college, I would have some sort of career, but it wasn't spoken and it wasn't that direct. It could have been anything, you know. I actually ended up not really finishing high school. Sort of, I went to culinary school and did a lot of studio art instead of my junior year. And then I got my GED, so could go to college, and I got a degree from a non-accredited high school. And it was real messy because it sort of coincided with some other issues in my family at the time. But yeah, there wasn't this strong sentiment of you have to go to college and that's your way to success. I thought we were going to talk about success.
We are.
Okay.
We're getting to it.
All right. Yeah, it wasn't so linear, right? It could have been anything. When I was 15, my plan was I was pretty into ceramic sculpture at the time. That's what I spent most of high school doing. And that was my plan at like age 15, 16. And then when my friends went off to college, when they finished high school, I got sort of scared. And I was like, oh, I should go to college. And I got into Rhode Island School of Design to be an architecture student. I'd done a lot of drafting as a kid. My mom's hobby was flipping houses. So I was always looking at real estate and doing floor plans and stuff. So I thought I was going to be an architect for a while. But my family sort of fell apart. My parents got divorced when I was 17. And instead of going to Rhode Island School of Design, they told me they didn't have any money to pay for school and they weren't going to help me financially in any way. And I ended up going to the University of New Mexico because I could get a full scholarship there and I didn't have any income or didn't have any money. So did that for a while. They don't exactly have the best architecture school, so that wasn't very inspiring. So I switched back to ceramic sculpture. I did that for a couple years. That was going okay. And then my dad died near the beginning of my junior year of college, which was a real blow to the system. And I made it about halfway through my spring semester and then decided to switch directions. I dropped out of UNM mid-semester, went and traveled in Asia for about 5 months. And what I had set up was starting school at Prescott College in Arizona, where I got a bachelor's in adventure education with an emphasis in wilderness leadership. So
I like how you said it like that. So perky.
One thing I didn't know about college that it turns out is really important is that if you're getting a liberal arts degree, no one cares what your degree in at all. Like, it doesn't matter. It could be anything. It doesn't matter when you apply for a job. No one has even looked at my bachelor's degree. I'm sure most people have had the same experience. So, yeah, I had no idea. I thought there was some connection between what you were going to do in your life and your bachelor's degree.
I mean, I think it's okay to make that assumption when your, brain is still developing. Like, what do you mean people don't work in the, the field in which they study? It's common misconception for young people. But I mean, I know, so there were, and we will still get to the question about success, because I think you're basically laying the foundation of kind of filling us in on that point exactly that you said. Life isn't linear, right? Or the path that I've taken has been the furthest from linear. So once you got your bachelor's degree, I mean, I know you in the sense that like you have an advanced degree and you're also like, you've moved all over the place. And so why don't you actually fill folks in like at, what were some of the things that you did right after undergrad leading to kind of your advanced degree?
Sure. So, I came out of this college with this degree in wilderness leadership, and I had this dream of working in adventure travel. I thought I was going to take people on trips around the world or be a climbing guide internationally or something like that. And a couple things happened. One, I'm not that good at climbing, so that sort of went out the window pretty quick. And then I got married to someone I met on one of the trips I was on in college. And I didn't want to travel all the time because I wanted to be with my wife. So I was trying to figure out what to do after school. and someone said, "Oh, why don't you get a job in wilderness therapy? You can work 8 days on, 6 days off." And I had no idea what wilderness therapy was and hadn't ever heard of it. And this is in 2003. So I started looking at websites. I remember looking at the Anasazi website back in 2003. If any of your listeners can get it, I'll just leave that image in your head. So I started looking around, and I ended up taking a job at Second Nature in Duchesne, Utah, back in, when was that? January 2004, as a field guide, and really, really falling in love with the work. Not immediately. The first year was a mix of things. It's had some incredible positive experiences, worked with some amazing therapists, amazing field guides. I also had some terrible experiences working with field guides that should not have been doing that work, and therapists that were sort of weird. Yeah, I hope none of you are listening. I don't remember your name if you're one of those weird people. So work harder next time to make a better impression. Anyway, but after a couple of years, really falling in love with the work and finding a home in that. Wilderness therapy is special stuff. It's people always ask me why I like it so much, and it's the place where I feel like I can most be myself of anywhere I've ever been. I think the only thing that's comparable for me in some ways is when I travel and I'm completely outside of the context of my own society. Like, I can really be myself because no one is watching me or pressuring me. And I feel that way in wilderness too. Like, I can really be myself there. So yeah, I love that. And I did that for 5 years. And then I broke my back really badly, which threw me for a loop. I couldn't stand or move or do anything for quite a while. So I ended up moving to South Korea for a couple of years to teach English as a way to try and recover and do something that wasn't physical. And then I came back to the States. There's a long story of like recessions and jobs and sort of missed connections and things, but basically ended up coming back and restarting in wilderness therapy again as a guide and doing that for a few more years. And then I started looking around at the guys who had been doing it for 20 years, and they were like 45, 50 and still living in their truck. And they were doing like backup for the field or little errands and stuff because they're really too old and crusty to actually backpack anymore. And I was like, oh man, that's scary. I can't do that. That's not a good plan. So I had no other choice but to become a therapist. I had to do it. And I went back to school, Southern Colorado. And that was 2014, 2015. Went to grad school, got a master's degree in clinical mental health counseling, and then started out with different jobs as a therapist. Landed at Legacy Outdoor Adventures in 2017, I want to say, something like that. I'm not sure when I got there, but I was there for about 5.5 years until just this past May, when I moved to Boise, Idaho, oddly enough.
I don't think I realized that you were at Legacy for that long.
Maybe it was 4.5 years. It's
well,
somewhere right.
Still, that's longer.
Yeah, that's the longest time I've ever worked anywhere or lived anywhere in my whole life by like a large margin.
Wow. Yeah. Well, and I love how you just like really concisely packed in like, a solid 15 to 20 years of your life. And you just made it seem so like it wasn't linear by any means, but it was just beautifully described, kind of the journey that you took. And so I was enjoying being on it. But so I ask this question because now we're getting to the root of what you thought that this podcast was, and it is about. So knowing that you left Legacy, you've now uprooted to a completely different state, and you're kind of doing a different thing now. But I always ask folks, like based on the reflection of your journey and where you are now, do you see yourself as successful?
Yes. It's but it's a process. It's not, I actually think that's one of the big problems with conceptions of success in our society, is that it is not some place that you arrive to when you're there and then you're done. I mean, it's cliche to say, or we can, Prescott College's motto is, it's education is not a destination, it's a journey. Everyone's heard some variation of that saying, right? So some days I feel successful and some I don't, but yeah, generally speaking, I've done the things I've set out to do. Although that is not really, if you want to get into what I think of as the definition of success, exactly how I would paint that picture. But yeah. Do you want that definition?
Yeah. Do it.
I've been thinking about this because we were planning this for so long. So I had a bunch of times when I was like, okay, what am I going to say? So I've been through it a bunch in my head.
Where are you at now?
But it's the same. I just, rewording it because of the neuroses. But I think it's about creating meaning in your life. And that is, I think, for a lot of people, the elephant in the room when it comes to mental health, when it comes to figuring out how to wade through modern society. I think it's really problematic when success is seen as something that's objective rather than subjective, right? It's really about what it is that you decide has meaning for you and how you make that, as opposed to something external that you obtain or you get to, or just is definite, right? When success is something that's definite, or when something has inherent value, I think that's actually really dangerous. There's a lot of pitfalls there.
Well, and that's hence the title of this podcast, right? Like, the idea of success is that the majority of society makes it an objective, right? Or kind of tangible kind of focus, when in reality it's completely internalized and needs to be based on each of us individually.
Yeah. When you ask if I see myself as successful, I think I'm actually really good at finding meaning in my life. Although I am a little thrown at the moment because I've just sort of, at least temporarily, maybe long term, put a pin in a 17-year career in wilderness therapy. So that's one area that has created a lot of meaning for me. I've looked to for meaning, or however, it's reciprocal, but it's in that place, and I'm not doing that right now. So I got here and I was like, okay, what am I doing? What is meaningful? And there's some things that are old that I've held on to, like outdoor adventure is super important to me. So I'm working really hard to make that happen, despite the fact that Boise is in the middle of nowhere and not near the mountains if you're planning on moving here.
So, like, reverse psychology. If you're trying to go to Boise, it really isn't close to anything outdoor and active, so don't come.
I'm just very particular. There's no rock climbing near Boise, and the good skiing is many hours away. And I'm very spoiled, having just lived in Utah for a long time, where there's good skiing and good climbing everywhere. So that's tough. But that's one thing that's super meaningful, and I look to that. But I also, I stopped making artwork, ceramic sculpture, in 2001 or maybe 2002. I think it was 2001. I don't know. And I hadn't made a single sculpture in 20 years. And then I started working in ceramics again when I got to Boise. And that's been fantastic. Almost like in these manic states. It's so exciting. And people in the studio are like, what's it like being back? And I'm like, it is so great. And I'm just like, have so much energy and waking up early to go do that stuff. And, in an objective sense, like, that has no meaning, right? It's not valuable. It's not going to make money. I'm never going to be a famous artist. Some people like my stuff. Other people don't. Sometimes I don't even like my art. Like, I have a piece sitting behind me in the living room here that is so ugly, and it's just terrible. But the process of making it, super thrilling, super meaningful for me. So I think everyone has different areas. Sometimes it's one big thing that gives you meaning. Sometimes it's like lots of different things. Um, but I think that's the really tricky part in life, is figuring out how to do that if you find yourself in a place where it's not just there, or you have a loss of meaning.
Well, and to kind of piggyback off of that, I think I would love to hear from you a piece of advice that you would give to a young adult. And it could even be like, like a clone, right? Of David circa 16 years old. Like what piece of advice would you give a young person right now? Because I mean, you and I, we work, or we have worked, we currently work, we're still in this like sphere of working with young adults, right? This like emerging kind of population of this next wave of who's going to be leaders and artists in the world. And I think it's important for us to just think through, like what advice would you give to somebody that is struggling? And also I'll throw it out there that when I say struggling, there is no specific definition that I'm referencing. So I'd love to kind of hear your musings or inner thoughts on, what advice would you give to somebody that's kind of in that spot right now?
Sure. Well, I think first of all, most of the clients I've worked with over the years are not aware that meaning is something that they choose for themselves, right? Their paradigm is that the things that have meaning come from the outside. It's my parents told me this is what is meaningful, or Instagram told me this is what is meaningful, or the other kids in school told me this. So it's not something that they make for themselves, and they don't know that that's a choice, right? They're sort of stuck inside this paradigm in which they have to respond to that external value sense of what's valuable. And to some extent, that's developmental. I think when you're a child, you absorb all this stuff about what's meaningful, and that creates your personality and your the way you see the world, your sort of lens for understanding things. But it's not necessarily fixed. It can be hard to change, but it's not set. If you decide that something else is valuable, you can pursue that. And I always find it fascinating that people who have a lot of means, who have money and time and opportunity and privilege and can do whatever they want, are often the most limited. They are the most stuck in this sense of, I can only do this thing because that thing is valuable. So over the years, I've had so many clients come to me who are really severely depressed or severely anxious. They're suicidal. They've sort of lost it with drugs, because the thing that they actually want to do, or the thing that they want to be, or things they want to be, they feel like they can't be those things, and they don't understand that they can do whatever they want. It's actually not, none of these things are set. But it's a really scary shift to let go of that belief, right? I mean, really, really scary. And people lose it because they can't. They can't let go of that. So I think that's the first thing that I often hope to help young people work through, is seeing that they can do whatever they want, and it's okay to do the thing that maybe dad does or society tells you to do. There's nothing wrong with that, but it's going to be up to you to decide whether or not that's actually what you want. And you can suppress it for a long time. I think a lot of people push that down, and maybe they get to some sort of midlife crisis where they're like, holy cow, I did all the things I was supposed to do, and I still don't feel very good. I have all the things I'm supposed to have, but what is the point? Right? So, existential therapy has really fallen out of fashion. Everyone wants this quick fix, and what are the 8 steps that will get me back on the track to doing the thing I'm supposed to do? But for people who get stuck in mental health problems, I think that this is something that you have to get to, because without it, you're just sort of hiding from that fear that things aren't meaningful. Also, to get even scarier, I'll go ahead and say nothing has any meaning, right? Other than the meaning you give it. So nothing is inherently meaningful, which is like another step in that progression along the same path. So that's really scary. But when you actually come to terms with it, it's really freeing, because then you can choose. Then you can be like, well, I don't want to do any of those things that I'm supposed to do. I want to do something else entirely. So for a lot of people, taking the set path, that works fine. And that's great. If you want to do those things, and, you sort of feel good about what you're doing, and you're moving through life and you're doing what you're supposed to do. But for the young people you and I work with, that's not the case, right? Either they don't know what they want to do, or a lot of the time they're really poorly aligned to do the thing that they've been told they're supposed to do. They're not really set up that way. And then they have all this negative self, whatever, they say, oh, I can't do that thing. I'm not actually very good at math or English or business or money or whatever it is I'm supposed to be good at. So now my life is garbage and I have to destroy myself or avoid. But people don't take the time to go and explore and say, what else could I be doing? What might I? It's not really what am I good at. It's really what do I want to do. And I will say, if I look at my own life path, I'm not necessarily inherently very good at being around people, talking to people, doing the therapy stuff or whatever that stuff is, listening. I don't know about that. I was raised to be an artist, a visual artist, and that's where my skills lie. But it's not what I wanted to do. What I wanted to do was pursue this thing with outdoor education and therapy, and learning about meaning in life, learning how to be with people, learning how to be assertive is a really hard thing to do. Maybe even learning how to listen, which I do every once in a while. And yeah, I did it because I liked it, because it was meaningful for me, and it was really hard. And I think from an objective standpoint, I think, was I ever really successful? Like, I don't own any companies, and I'm not famous, and I had some successes and some not, but mainly I did it because I wanted to, because it was meaningful for me. I liked it. So that is such a huge shift for young people to make. I think that's what's really hard. But it is also, I'm probably repeating myself here, but it's at the core of mental health work, I think, in modern American society. And that's not necessarily the case for those who have really extreme, or maybe not extreme, maybe severe mental health issues. But for most of us, for most of the people with depression and anxiety and fear, and most people who are stuck as young adults or teenagers and can't figure out what to do, this is a piece for them that they have to take on.
That was very profound, and I'm going to continue to sit with that. Honestly, for myself, I feel like not even the clients that I work with, is just like, what in my life is meaningful, and what am I doing? Is the work that I'm doing actually meaningful to me? That's like such an important kind of opportunity for me to sit and really be reflective and have that self-awareness. And like you said, maybe the last time I did art was like 20 years ago too. And I've been like I've been interested, not meaning, sorry, scratch that. I've been really curious to like tap back into that. Not that that would bring me any money either, nor do I want to be a famous artist, but I am very interested in just like actually exploring the opportunity to be creative, because that's definitely a part of my brain that I have turned offline for a while. So I just think about, again, the translation of all of the tidbits that you just discussed, and how kind of informative that can be to a young adult right now. So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, my pleasure.
How can people get in touch with you, other than the fact that they could just like show up in Boise knowing that they're not going to be rock climbing, or they're not going there to ski? But if somebody wanted to actually get in touch with you, either to link up with you, or honestly, even just to express gratitude, listening to you share your story, maybe something you said is really resonating with them, which is definitely a common thing that at least some of my guests are getting back to me on, saying like, hey, I've heard from some folks just appreciating me for being vulnerable and talking through this. How can people reach out to you?
So I'm pulling back from social media because it's not good for my mental health. So you're going to have to go old school and actually email me if you want to talk to me. It's really cool. It's my first email. It's Santa Fly. Santa like Santa Claus, fly like flying airplane. SantaFly@hotmail.com.
We'll make sure that we have that in the show notes so people can just click on it and shoot you an email. I love that fact that was your first email ever.
Yeah, I'm keeping it until they tell me I can't have it anymore.
That's amazing. Well, David, I'm glad we finally were able to do this. And I just appreciate you. Thank you again.
Thanks, Shona. Thanks for doing this and taking the time. It's been great.
That's it for this week's Success is Subjective episode. I want to thank my guests for joining me on this week and for being willing to share your journey. This podcast would not exist if it weren't for people such as yourself. Stay tuned for our next episode where you can bet it'll be another amazing human sharing their personal story with the world. Make sure you check out the show notes where you will find contact information, website details, and all social media for our guest. Also, put a face with a voice by accessing their interview on the newly formed successissubjective.org website. If you're interested in being a guest on the podcast, you can email me at Joanna, Joanna, @successissubjective.org. I would also be remiss if I didn't tell you to check out the collegealternative.org and lilyconsulting.com websites for additional resources outside of podcasting. If you're listening to the show on Apple Podcasts, please do me a favor and subscribe. And while you're at it, feel free to leave a review. You can also download to listen to the Success is Subjective podcast on any other podcast playing app, such as Audible, Google, iHeartRadio, Spotify, Stitcher, and TuneIn. Last but not least, Success is Subjective is listener supported, made possible by me and by you. You can support this podcast by joining the Patreon community at patreon.com/successissubjective. Thank you for tuning in. And remember, there is no single path through life. Success is what you make it.